Hi everyone, welcome to Introduction to Classic Chinese Philosophy. Today, I am Yue. I guess you must have learned one thing or two from previous classes. And today, we're going to talk about the modern English writing of traditional Chinese philosophy. By exploring this topic, I invited two of my students. They are international students, Jaweed from Afghanistan and Muja, also from Afghanistan. Let them introduce themselves a little bit.
Hi, my name is Jawed Sukut from Afghanistan. My Chinese name is Zhao Yi. I study cross-culture in Communication University of China.
Hi everyone, my name is Jalal Mojadi. My Chinese name is Muja. I'm from Afghanistan. I also a student at Communication University of China, the same major with my friend Chai.
Okay, by talking about the writing of Chinese philosophy, it sounds sometimes so distant. So let's start from a more concrete topic. When did you first hear of China, even in your own country, your motherland?
Good question. When I had planned in my country, when I was in my country, I had planned to continue my study in China. Because at first, when I heard about China, and especially that was about two things especially. First, Chinese culture, and the second one, Chinese technology. And always I just was thinking with myself about the Chinese culture. Maybe the Chinese culture is different culture with our culture. When I go in China, maybe everything is different. Because my thought was maybe Chinese culture is similar with Western culture, but my culture, my life is maybe everything is different. And the second one, the technology. Always we saw different news, different online journals about China, and it was one of my dreams. I should continue my study in China, especially because there is a technology country. And they have so rich culture and different like historical and cultural places. I should see all of this in China. When I start my plan to come in China, and after that when I arrived in China, especially in Beijing, that at first week or first day, I saw everything different, like the Chinese culture, especially their daily life, about their food, their behavior, their talking, everything like completely different. It's a little bit similar with our culture. I feel myself really relaxed. Everything is okay. This culture is really nice culture, especially about the Chinese student here in this university. Their behaviors, they are so hard worker student. And all of Chinese people, one of the things I have a good memory in Beijing, in China, is that all of Chinese people, they are really so helpful people. Because when I came at first here, I couldn't speak even a word of Chinese, but always the Chinese people, they are help us in everywhere, every places. And another thing about when I came in at first in China, that was my new experience in China, about their thinking of philosophy, of Chinese thinking philosophy. When I start learning, there is completely everything is really nice and really good. And nowadays, I'm always thinking I should to continue my life in this way, because there is really nice thinking, there is really nice language, especially Chinese language, and the writing of Chinese culture. And nowadays, I'm really happy. I'm living in China. I'm continuing my study in this university in this area.
Just now you said that after you first came here, you find Chinese people are similar to you guys in some way, but so different in other ways. Could you please say more about that? In what way they're different and in what way they're similar?
Yes, one of the same, I think that's like our culture and Chinese culture the same way. Before I thought maybe Chinese culture behavior, everything is like Western or European country. But Chinese culture, like especially the young generation, all of our professors, I met many people in China. Nowadays, I have many friends. Their behavior, their talking, their everything is, in our country, we have that culture when you're talking with a foreigner, they're like our guest. I feel myself always in Beijing, in China. I'm one of the guests of Chinese people. They have a special respect for me, and they always try to help me to learning culture, to learning some new things, because my country, in some aspect, our system is different with China. And especially the Chinese food. I got many things. The Chinese food is similar with our country. Like especially, I really like Chinese noodles.
Okay, noodles?
Yeah, that's really delicious food. And another thing that Chinese people, they have some seafood. We also have in our country the seafood. That's some things like especially another thing I attend in a wedding ceremony with my friend. And their culture, their custom, most of their clothes, their talking, their everything is what's similar with our country. I talk with my friends, wow, their everything is, I didn't feel anything now so strange. It's okay for me.
You feel like home?
Yeah, it's my home. That was similar.
Okay, thank you for sharing what you know about Chinese. But actually, we do not grow into who we are today naturally. There are a lot of pioneering writers and presenters of China who try to bring China to the rest of the world and try to revitalize, refresh Chinese culture at the same time. And their efforts made us who we are today. And this course is going to introduce some of them and their pioneering efforts. So let's go. First, let's come to the context of early writing of Chinese culture into English. Try to imagine what will happen if you know some of your friends or close relatives going to serve as the ambassador into a foreign country. Most likely, we will give them big applause, flowers, trumpets, and fireworks. But back to 200 years ago, serving as an ambassador into a foreign country was not a pleasant affair. Try to look at this guy. His name is Guo Xiongtao. When he first got the news that he was going to serve as the first ever ambassador into United Kingdom, guess what he got? Instead of flowers and applause, he got some words of sarcasm. 出乎其类，拔乎其萃，不容于尧舜之事。未能事人，焉能事鬼？何去父母之邦？ Which amounts to say, if you are so great as an intellectual and as a talent, you should stay and live your motherland. Why should you serve those foreigners, those evils who live in a foreign and distant alien land? This is the context when China was first brought to the world. Actually, it was not eagerly joined into the world, but rather it was forced into the global system with a lot of unwillingness. Let us get to know a little bit who are those who brought China first into the world. Actually, there are two forces. One force is by migrant workers. In order to earn a decent living, they left their motherland. And under real construction contract, they were brought to United States. After they finished their drudgery and low-paying work, they were dismissed. But in order to make a living, they poured into the cities to serve as sewers, to serve as waiters and cooks, and even family handyman. They made very poor living and earned low-paid job. All they try to do is try to survive and make a bread in order to survive. But what did they get in the United States? Instead of warm welcome, what they got is Exclusion Act. They were not welcomed by local people. The second group of Chinese ever sent to the outside world is a group of young children. different from the first group of migrant workers. They are not forced into the world, but they eagerly seek opportunities from outside. Look at your young face and innocent eyes. You can never imagine, about 8 to 10 years later, they grow into the first ever railroad officer in China, the first university president in China, and even the first country president in China. They bring the knowledge they gain from Yale, from Harvard, from Cornell back to China and bring China into a global world. And after the efforts of these groups of young children, more and more people join into this force. Among them, Lin Yutang and Pearl Buck are two remarkable ones. Pearl Buck, I guess most of you may know who she was. She was the daughter of a priest family, and she grew up with her Presbyterian parents. She grew up in China and learned how to speak Chinese, and later she developed her writing career, and her novel, The Good Earth, was a vivid depiction of Chinese farmer and their farmer's life. He presented the original grassroots life to the world, and her work, The Good Earth, was made into movies and other publications, and later received Nobel Prize. And in her Nobel Prize winning speech, let's see how she willed her relationship and how she expressed her gratitude to China. Okay, in her speech, it goes on like this. I should now be truly myself if I did not speak also of the people of China, whose life has been for so many years my life, and whose life indeed must always be a part of my life. The minds of my own country and of China are alike in many ways, but above all, like all their common love of freedom. And while she made this speech, China suffered from the war, and Chinese people are raging really hard against the invasion of the Japan, and in order to express her love and her devotion to China, she writes about this country. And as closely, she has a friend who is Lin Yutang. He is also one of the first writers who write about Chinese culture in English language. He and Pearl Buck has been close friends for many years. Lin Yutang, he is a Chinese writer and a translator, also a linguist. All these set forth a solid foundation for his philosophic writing. His informal but polished styles of presenting Chinese culture into the rest of the world was well received. And the most fundamental of his writing is My Country and My People. From Lin Yutang's perspective, Chinese culture is the culture of a family. The relationship between family is a prototype of all kinds of relationships in the discourse of political, in the discourse of social, in the discourse of literary, and also in the discourse of art life. For him, the core of a family is father and son, and mother is basically ignored or as only the affiliation of father. And this father-son relationship was later extended to all kinds of discourse. In a family, father is not only a father, but also a leader, and son is not only a son, but also a follower. The son should always obey the father and carry out his will. And this relationship was also extended to the area of political discourse and also the social discourse. In political life, leaders are always compared to fathers, whose will needs to be obeyed. And all the people, all his followers, are compared to the sons, who is going to follow and carry out his will. And also in social life, the same is true. In public, there is always the leader taking the position of something like father, and always the follower taking the position of something like son. On this family-based culture, Lin Yutang brings his own reflection. The bad side of it is quite apparent. The father was compared to a superior, and the son was compared to an inferior. And the superior and inferior relation was always born with the natural identity, and there is no room for further improvement. So everyone was given a definite place right after they were born. There's hardly any effort to change that. And also, in this kind of family-based culture, women, the mothers, the daughters, they are basically given no place in the family decision. And the opportunity for their self-improvement and development, particularly the education opportunity, was very limited. But also, he thinks with this family-based philosophy, there is also some good aspects. For example, Chinese are easily to get satisfied, and born with their temperament, there is a sense of humor. They are not easily get infuriated because they have some taste for anything, going on with anything that they are satisfied with. Lin Yutang's work received some vehement criticism for his incomplete portrayal of Chinese. But in any way, he was the first courageous writer who tried to fulfill this task. And his work did provoke public interest in getting to know Chinese a little bit, particularly the Western world. They took on more interest into this Asian country. This is what pioneer writers have done about writing of modern Chinese culture into a different language. They tried really hard to bring China into the outside world. Their efforts may not be perfect, and their quest may never be finished, but their efforts in doing this itself deserves praising. After learning this course, I would like to know what you have learned after this session of the early efforts of experts writing Chinese.
Yeah, it was very interesting for me when I got paired back. There were two writers that they introduced Chinese culture to rule the world. One is Perlbach and another is Lin Yutang.
Yes.
They really deserve to praise, deserve to and to need to admire them because they really work hard. They really did their best to introduce Chinese culture in all around the world, and especially into another language, like they write it in English, because nowadays in English it is like globalization.
Yeah.
All can now and can read about Chinese culture. It is the efforts of the Perlbach and Lin Yutang. They did their best and show the Chinese culture in all around the world.
And in his writing, actually, he wrote a China quite different from today, right?
Sure.
In his writing, China was sort of quite confining, quite conservative. And
at the initial time, when I learned this, initial time, China culture was a little bit limit and restrict. But after that, the limitation was kind of like the females, especially, they were in suffering. They need to wear some different kind of shoes that was very small and give suffering the females. They felt so bad pain in their feet. The shoes was kind of bounding, and it had pain. Otherwise, if they didn't do this, maybe they could not to marry with the male, and it was a kind of a pain culture. After that, when Perlbach and Lin Yutang, they write it, and day by day, step by step, nowadays Chinese culture is really changed. It became into a modern culture.
Yes.
Yeah, and I learned really that Perlbach and Lin Yutang did their good efforts, and now we see that Chinese culture is different from ancient time of China. Because now is a modern culture, rapier culture, that it is, we should admire it.
And in their writing, women back then, they are confined to limited roles,
sure.
As well as men. They are confined also to limited roles. Do you ever observe that in China society now? What is your impression of Chinese women and Chinese men?
That's today culture. My impression about Chinese women and Chinese men, that's really they have the same rights. But when I read about the ancient time, Chinese culture was different about today, because in ancient time the right of female and male was different. Like, male was dominant and the female was low level in the family. But today they have the same rights. They are doing jobs the same right. They are working in the family the same works, and everything that they should do, it is the same, and every right is the same. Females and males, they have the same rights. It shows that China now is very open and very modern culture. That's men and women, they are the same. I think it's because of a good education that China has, because education is also belong to culture. China nowadays, it's a globalization, has a globalization education. All women and men, they are educated and they know their rights. It's very nice for a modern culture.
Yeah, I know you've been serving as a journalist in your country, and I'm so impressed that one day you told me you have been, while you serve as college professor, you've been telling some of your female students to be more active, to take more roles,
sure.
to develop themselves and to seek for a career. So after learning all this, the revitalization of Chinese culture and the room for women's liberty, what kind of message you will get for them in the future after you came back to your country and serve as university professor again?
Sure. The thing that I really learned in China, there is two things. One is education, another is hard working. I will teach to my students when I went back, you should hard work as a Chinese. Another thing is you should be educated, because if you be knowledgeable person and if you work hard, you will see your country like a China country, because China country is a sample country for me. Every time I will focus on my students to work hard and study more and be educated, be more knowledgeable, you will see one day your country like a China country, because nowadays China is a big, proud country with good culture, good technology, with good development. It is sure that your culture is a good culture. You focus on education, you focus on your same rights, you focus on hard working, you focus on technology. And our country, they just more focus on religion. And I should teach them that you should be more focused on education and work hard.
Okay, so much for today's class. Based on Lin Yutang and ProBugs case, we know that they made really great effort in trying to bring China to the outside world. Let us invite friends worldwide and global-wide to join this process and be a hero. Okay, thank you for attending to my course today. See you next time.